horse drifted alarmingly in the betting, was, fancied in the morning, continued to drift. It was late on the exchanges to lose. It was something you'd see in a Dick Francis novel, Charles Buttons.
The ground is soft. It's
heavy.
It's soft on times.
It's heavy.
Okay.
A very warm welcome to the Bar Steward's Inquiry Sunday Sermon. What a show we've got for you this weekend, because we had a lot of shenanigans on Saturday, which I'm afraid didn't seem to put racing in a very good light in certain parts of social media and amongst the masses. So, joining myself, John and Chris to discuss the important issues of this weekend and the fallout from it, we've got a special guest, Abby McGregor. Hello, Abby.
Hello there.
Yes. Abby is an avid racing owner, supporter. She's also done the media rounds, debating the antis on things like the whip. So she's very experienced in these sort of topics and making the vegetables that listen, that basically they'll hate her as much as they do the sport itself. You can't pacify the antis, we know this. But Abby's done a great job doing the media rounds, so it's a pleasure to have you on board for this chat. Right. Okay, then. So what took place yesterday? For me, it wasn't a shock. We discussed this on Friday, that it was probably likely to happen.
Toes on with ranked.
Yeah, it was. So basically then, how have we got here? How did it happen? How was it allowed? Why was it allowed to happen?
Well, I was standing on the steps of the weighing room, and when I saw that the jockeys were not coming down, my heart sank, and I thought, oh gosh, it's them. They've done it, haven't they? And you could feel the tension, you could feel the mood of everybody in the paddock. And I think how we've got here is we haven't spent enough time calling these people out for what they are. They have a very narrow definition of what it means to love an animal. They think that in order to truly love an animal, you've got to have absolutely nothing to do with it. But we know from our own research...
That's called marriage, isn't it? That's a perfect marriage, I think. I have to write that down. Sorry, carry on.
No problem. But by taking an active role in their highly specialised care, it means that we can actually give them a better chance of survival and a better quality of life. They live with a for themselves, and we should be putting out there the very powerful and persuasive fact that actually 13% of fatalities occur on the racetrack, compared to, I think it's 62% of horses that die on their own in a field. So I think that we as an industry have, and actually in fairness that has changed this week, but before, we as an industry have been very defensive on our welfare record, very defensive on our stats, very negative on our stats and statistics, whereas actually what we need to do is talk about our welfare journey with pride. Look at where we've come from the Grand National. Look at how much safer it is now compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We have done an absolutely fantastic job, and we should be talking about that before the main event. You know, there's a famous Linton Crosby saying, you can't fatten a pig on market day. So what you can't expect to do is start talking about welfare a week before the Grand National or Cheltenham or Ascot and expect that will convince people. You have to create a sustained campaign over a long period of time that shows that welfare is not something that we've just bolted onto racing. It's at the heart of everything we do. And I have to say that the CEO of the Jockey Club, Nevin Truesdale, has done an absolutely phenomenal job this week of kickstarting that strategy. He's been absolutely on it in terms of not defending our record, talking about our record, our research, our analysis with pride. And that is the direction of travel that we should be going in.
Good stuff, Abby.
These abolitionists, and let's make no mistake, that's what they are. They're abolitionists. They don't want racing to continue in any way, shape or form.
No.
They will never be appeased, no matter what our record is on welfare.
Because they're bad faith actors. That's the
Yeah.
You can't negotiate in bad faith. That's the problem.
No. And I think the Kevin Blake situation on the Piers Morgan show summed that up. Because the bloke Kevin was up against was just prepared to lie his arse off. He'd been to a racing yard somewhere near Newcastle forgive me, but I'm not entirely sure there would be that many that would have the likes of him involved. Unless you've been to say Chris Grant or somebody like that, I don't know. But I can't say it. And Kevin did ask him to name it. He couldn't. And he wasn't bothered, because he was perfectly happy to lie about it. The amount of just disingenuous information and lies these people, PETA and Animal Rising, just post, you never ever convince them that this is anything other than a barbaric pastime.
No, it's just coming back to Abby's point regarding statistics and stuff. Richard Hoyles was brilliant on LBC today.
Yeah,
highlighting that 14,000 horses currently in training and 50,000 are in the industry, breeding stock, etc., etc. So if we look in 2022, there was 86,393 runs in the UK, horses that turned up to the races. That was 86,393. There were 178 deaths on the track, which according to Animal Aid as well. That's 0.2% chance over a year of the horse losing its life. I'd like to bet if you just left them all in a field that those stats would be similar.
I think there'd be a lot higher myself.
Yeah, or exactly. Somebody made the point today via social media regarding that if you just let the horses out into a field, which is what this Animal Rising charity wants to happen. That
they're always shouting to come in at tea time.
Yes, they'd be wondering where the food is. Where's the? This is the thing, and then they just become malnutritioned and just die in the field. I just can't have it. I can't have the arguments they put forward. But yet, why, Chris? I'll come to you. Why are the mainstream media allowing no marks? Bearing in mind, I'd never heard of Animal Rising. I heard of PETA, I've heard of RSPCA, but I'd never heard of Animal Rising prior to this week.
Animal Aid under a new guise or something? They had more relaunches than Keir Starmer, to be honest.
Frank Sinatra. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the media's obsession with Twitter and social media. And what a lot of people forget is that most people aren't on Twitter, and Twitter is a massive echo chamber. So whatever your view on whatever subject, you are guaranteed to find a community of other people who agree with you. And then you get stuck in that feedback loop where you after using it a while, you're convinced that everyone agrees with you. And what the media have got to do is step back and say that, who are Animal Rising? Are they a credible lobby group or a group of sort of, middle-class students that are just up for some jolly japes? The latter, I suspect. So I think we give groups like Animal Rising far too much credibility. They will have regarded their stunt yesterday as being a resounding success. There were 150, 200 people up there, and they've guaranteed themselves, column inches in the press, on social media, yada, yada, yada. But, behind them, what is there? Most people do not share their view. Most people, as we've already discussed, do not want to see animals abused in the name of sport. Lots and lots and lots of people enjoy the Grand National. And, these protests aren't new. The fact that it's only because they become publicised for social media purposes that, suddenly everyone's talking about them. There've always been protests.
Do you think there's an element of class war in this as well, Chris?
In what sense, John? I mean,
in the sense
yeah,
of they think they're sticking it to the toffs.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually slightly more complicated than that. I think it's sticking it to the toffs, but also ensuring that the working man doesn't get to do what he wants to do. Because these are bourgeois middle class liberals, right? These are these aren't the proles. These aren't the people who own the means of production, to use a classic Marxist analogy. This is the bourgeoisie. They're neither one nor t'other. So what you've got here is the politics of envy, good old Daily Mail phrase. But equally, you've got the idea is that the proles need to be protected from themselves. They don't understand that these animals are being abused in the name of sport. So it's up to us to set them on the path of righteousness. So I think there are lots and lots of things going on here, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact that most people involved in these movements aren't in it for any great ideological attachment to it. They're out for a day out. It's fun. You get nicked. Guess what, Jacinda? I got slung in the back of a police van. Oh, what jolly japes. Let's have another pint of Rutland Old Comestible or whatever in the student bar. These are, in 2 years' time, these will finish their degrees or go on. They'll go on to be corporate lawyers or fucking bankers. like all the 60s protesters in the States did, right? So you know, we must be mindful of their concerns and keep a weather eye on public opinion. But these people don't represent public opinion at all. And I think we're giving far too much credit.
Okay, I mean, let me come from advocate though. How did all us four feel how the race went yesterday? I didn't find it comfortable viewing. I've got to be honest, I just didn't. I don't know if that was to do with the delay. For example, Tom Stanley put a post out saying that in the last 9 renewals, there'd been 17 fallers or unseats at the first 2 fences. There was 8 yesterday. That could have been down to the delay. That the balance of probability said that could have been the case with a rush to the start. They didn't have enough time to prepare. Maybe the jockeys didn't have time to prepare mentally than what they do for the race. I don't know, but how do we all feel how the race went yesterday?
I mean, it was sort of nervous watching, wasn't it? But again, as I've already said, the tension was in the air before the race started, and I think that it goes to show how little these people understand the animals that they're talking about, because they obviously thought that by not being physically present on the track when the horses were, that it wouldn't cause any disruption or distress, and it obviously did. You know, animals, as we know, can sense these things, and so I think what they set out to achieve failed in one regard, but obviously they did achieve what they wanted to achieve in the sense that obviously a lot of horses fell. And so I think it comes back to, we can't appease the unappeasable. We are never going to please animal rebellion, but they are not the only group out there. They are at the extreme end of the continuum. There are people in the middle who we need to get racing. We need to get more people racing to secure its long-term success. And so every campaign has a principle that you have to follow, whereby you have to talk about your strengths. Our strength is our welfare record. We've done amazing scientific research for our welfare record to improve it year on year. And as we know, 99% of horses, over 99% of horses come back safe from the track. But we also, in doing that at the same time, because it only works if you do them both together, we have to highlight the weaknesses of our opponents. And their weaknesses are the information that they provide is unreliable, exaggerated and unsubstantiated. And so what we have to do is we have to sow the seed of doubt in the public's mind that these people actually are spouting nonsense. The people that they bring on TV are fantastic at speaking powerfully and emotionally about the abuse that horses allegedly suffer. That's why they use them. But what we then have to do is say, hang on a minute. Some of the things that they are saying are outright lies. They had this animal consultant on from Animal Aid talking about how horses are disposed of after their racing careers. That's an outright lie. And the more we challenge them, the more we come out and say, I mean, let's lose this flowery language we've got going on. It's not a mistruth. It's not a misconception. It's a lie. We need to call them out constantly so that when people hear them talking, they think, hang on a minute, is that true? Notice that Extinction Rebellion and Just Oil have quietened down a little bit because they did it so much that it got to the stage where people thought, hang on a minute, this doesn't say, this can't be right. This is some of the things that they're saying. They're just so outlandish and wrong. So at the same time as talking about our excellent welfare record and talking about the incredible spectacle that racing is, and talking about the sport in an incredibly positive light, we also need to highlight the madness of our opponents. We need to be bolder. We need to be sharper.
I agree with most of that, Abby. Just one thing I would say, that there was a documentary I watched which did upset me, to be devil's advocate on the other side. I think it's Panorama one where the Swindon Abattoir, there was like named horses like formerly owned by the Moniers. I forget the name of the horse. It was a grey horse, but that ended up in the old Swindon Abattoir. So I do still think there's a lot more we do need to do in certain areas to be. I'm not saying to placate these people, because these people cannot be placated, but I'm on about from a welfare point of view that, you know, I know since then that the Jockey Club, etc., have stepped up, and the BHA regarding ownership after an owner's finished, you know, they track them now to say, right, where is this horse? What have you done with this horse? And I think that needs to be at the forefront to make sure that there's no more of these programs popping up, the gotcha moments where we end up with a lovely grey that was formerly running a Grand National that ends up in an abattoir. So there is work. There is work to be done there, but obviously that's another thing. But why is it, Chris, John? Why are we getting to a stage where we watch the mainstream media, and I've actually watched Abby as well with defence. Why are we getting to the stage where stats are allowed to be misconstrued completely? Like everything they seem to say is complete and utter lies. Why have we got to this stage? And it isn't just horse racing. I think it's.
Well, we've had 13 years of government ministers getting away with that, like.
Well, that's true. That is true. But this is it. So it's. But then why are the BHA then? So the BHA, we've got a very powerful media arm if they choose to use it. Why are the BHA not coming out in vociferous defence of this sport? Why have they let it get to a stage where some absolutely no mark appears on GMB unchallenged?
Well,
I think, yeah, but they claim they weren't invited to participate in that GMB thing. The BHA said that they asked and were, denied an invitation, apparently.
Harrington appeared on Friday, but she did everything barring apologise for existing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you've seen how if we cede to these people and all these people's demands, you've seen with the whip and what's that's caused. They're not interested in banning the whip. They're interested in banning racing. So,
I've said it before and I'll say it again, Lee. Harrington's just completely the wrong figurehead for this sport because she doesn't understand it. She has no concept of its history and she would not go into bat for it. Harrington goes into bat for Harrington and keep Harrington in post.
So those school dinners won't serve themselves, will they?
No.
We've got a problem here that the leader of the sport is not really proactive enough in defending it, in sort of be highlighting, what a great sport it is. They don't do nowhere near enough. And
the likes of Abbey, Kevin Blake, Hoyles, 20 times better than Harrington's performance. Now, if this game is going to be proactive, it needs to be looking at that. They should all be sitting around the table on Monday and saying, why are them three so much better than our chief exec?
Exactly. It's not an easy job to do, to go on mainstream channels and sound eloquent and defend the sport in the right way. It might look easy, but the fact that Kevin Blake, Abbey did it with the whip debate, you've got Hoyles this morning on LBC that was outstanding. And
don't you find him boring, though? God, he's like a human sleeping. Oh, he's like a human mogadon. Christ, he's like a golf club bore, I think. Give aspirin a day, he would, honestly. Never mind, carry on.
A golf club bore. James Knight, for example, he works for Coral. He's Coral. I don't know, he's odds compiler at Coral. I'm not sure actually what he does, but he's at Coral anyway. And he said it was uncomfy viewing the National, and he said changes are needed. But I don't know what you could actually do. Is there anything you could actually do to the race to make it safe?
Yeah, remove all the horses and the fences and build a massive housing estate on it. There you are. That's the answer. And that and Cheltenham. That's the only thing that will appease. But I didn't find it uncomfortable viewing at all personally, and I think people who are finding it slightly uncomfortable are doing it through the prism of the protest that preceded it. I think if you remove that, it was a typical National in my view. And in fact, it probably wasn't as bad as some. So I just didn't find it as uncomfortable as a lot of people are saying.
I already think we've gone too far down that road. Because
the
easy offences now and levelling those drops off, I don't know if you noticed, but that field was terribly compacted towards the inside rail yesterday, going down them first 6 fences.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
if you compare that to other years, the spread right across the track, there's plenty of room. I mean, there was absolute gut-wrenching scenes going over them first 6 fences down the inside. Because horses had no room to jump. They were unsighted at fences. I personally wasn't comfortable with it, but I'm not a jump racing fan, as you know. And my problem is now that we've gone so far down the road of letting the antis have a voice and letting them into our sport, I feel compelled to defend something that I'm not all that keen on, because I know that if they get their way, they're coming for my code next, flat racing.
Yeah, they won't stop. They will not stop, as we've all highlighted on this show.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing for me, though, as I said with the Grand National, it's a problem for racing going forwards because it's the shop window, in effect, that I'm not saying it attracts new audiences or anything like that, but it's a national institution that most people in this country enjoy a bet on it and do it once a year as our Grand National betters. It's a tradition for some a lot of families to have a bet on the National. Are we getting to a stage where, because the mainstream media in particular are allowing more coverage for the antis, for the absolute prohibitionists, this is like sitting in public minds now that, oh no, we're not watching this anymore, it's cruel. And that's a big worry for racing, is it not?
It shouldn't be our shop window.
What should, John?
Anything other than the National, to be honest.
Chariot racing. That's what we should be doing. Honestly, Ben Hurst. If you want to see a pile up there.
We're basically on a good fucking to nothing with the National.
Yeah.
Because
you can't win.
You're lucky if you get away with no deaths. Let's be clear about this. And you're on tenterhooks over the race, over the build-up, everything. It's people that are only having this once a year involvement. If the National didn't exist, for me, racing would be no worse off. But it can't be seen to pull the National now because of where we are. Yeah,
once you start seeding, right? So, I mean, this will bring me on nicely to sort of Nick Davis's point of view regarding, let's say you get rid of the National. What's to stop them then coming for the Cheltenham Festival? Because if there's no National and no entry, so they've just said, right, we're not having this anymore.
Well, what I would suggest, Lee, is limit the field to 20 and let the race die slow down.
If you limit it to 20, though, John, you're going to have the top weight off 160 and the bottom off about 156.
And so what? It's one race in the calendar.
Mm.
And let public interest die off and just let the race run. And you'd definitely have less accidents with 20 going round and stuff it, Forget this shop window malarkey. And forget having the public on your back for a fortnight in the week before and a week after.
But for a fact that I'm worried now about the Derby. I think they might target the Derby because the Derby's the only other race in the calendar that usually, I'm not saying always, makes the national news. So, and the Derby would be easier to target because we know.
Well, if you move it back to Wednesday, half the fuckers might have to sign on.
No, they don't need to sign on. It's trust funds. That's what it is. You pick your check up. I'm not sure I agree, Lee. I mean, I think it's harder for them to spin the cruelty narrative when you are dealing with a race that has, a minuscule number of injuries over the years and involves some of the most powerful people in the globe. I just don't get. I think it'd be much more difficult for the antis to spin a compelling argument as regards to Derby or high-profile flat racing. Jump racing a lot easier, isn't it? Because it's a much more visually arresting spectacle, horses crashing through fences, etc., etc. So I don't think they'll turn their eye on flat racing just yet.
Abby, I don't think they actually care, the antis, do they? Because it doesn't matter. They can spin any narrative they want because they'll just fudge some statistics and just look good on a television debate. I mean, I'm right, Anna, on this.
No, absolutely, because when you look at what these people actually believe, they have a very narrow definition of what it means to love an animal, as I've already said, but also they all have very authoritarian views, and they think that because they don't like horse racing, that should be the view of everybody. We are going to force people to dislike horse racing. We're going to pump them full of these fake facts and statistics. We're going to go on and tell an emotional sob story on TV, and we are going to enforce our views on people, whether they like it or not. And that's why they are allowed to go on social media and go on TV and say these things, because it makes good television, because it's exciting and people say, oh, what's going on here? What's going on in the minds of these people? And so I think that there are things that we can do in regards to how we talk about welfare. we always tend to talk about it from a more negative point of view. Every time we talk about welfare, it's always after there's been a grand national fall or a death. Why don't we talk about welfare in a positive light, in the sense that why aren't we encouraging, as an industry, syndicate ownership? Now, we talked about class earlier before. Long gone are the days where you have to be a wealthy individual to own a racehorse. You can, I think, like I saw the other day, Philip Hobbs, you can buy a share of a racehorse for £35. And so that is
I wouldn't send him 35 quid, I promise you. But anyway, I want him to send me 35 now, just for the privilege, honestly. Oh.
No, indeed. That's a positive welfare story, because what that means is you're actively getting people closer to the sport so they can see what goes on for themselves. And then what you've expanded the pool of people that are willing to go out there and explain, no, look, I own a horse, trust me, they are well looked after. Because we can't get to the stage where we keep talking about negative welfare in the sense that these are the measures we've done to stop deaths, because at some point you're going to get to the stage where someone's going to say, oh, you know what, let's put some fairy lights on the green screen to make it look a bit nicer. Yeah, let's put some flowers on it or something. I'm going to get to that sort of silly stage. And so whilst at the moment it's absolutely the right thing to do, to be talking about how we reduce deaths, how we reduce falls, and to combat these people, call them out as extremists. Because, I mean, look, the reason why they wear their T-shirts, the reason why they told everyone what they were doing before the event was because it was all an act of self-promotion and self-advertisement, and so they could make a bucket load of cash. That's what it's all about. And so at the moment, yes, we should hit them where it hurts, in the sense that we need to talk about their mistruths. We need to talk about all we're doing. But they want us to keep talking about deaths and falls, because that's their territory. That's where they thrive. That, I mean, so for example, I think the BHA used a statistic today in a press release that 0.2% of is the fatality rate now. Yeah, which is a low number, and that's great. But we're talking about, we're trying to address people who are not interested in horse racing. We're talking about the average person on the street. Now, I come from a background of neuroscience. Nobody knows what 0.2% looks like. You draw me 0.2% of a circle. It's a meaningless figure, because you're using the negative number. You're using the death rate. And Animal Rebellion have got a better statistic. 2 horses a week die. Now, whether that's true or not, 2 horses a week is easier to visualize. It's a better statistic. So what we should be saying is 99% of horses come back safely, because that's the positive statistic. And you've got to think about how people perceive what you're saying. It's not enough to just write a snazzy sounding press release. You've got to think, what does the average person hear when they read this or they hear it? And so when people hear 99%, what they actually hear is close to 100. You have to think about the psychology of it. That's what these protest groups do. That's what their strength is. They think about what is going to engage social media, TV, and people the most, and they will say whatever it takes to engage people. Whatever it takes. And so we have to think, okay, hang on a minute. What can we say that is going to make the biggest impact on people? So that's where I come back to being much, much sharper. We have to play them at their own game without getting into their kind of territory of falsehoods, because we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that, because we have the data to back it up. And the reason why they spend so much time on social media is because they don't.
Regarding Abby's point there about statistics and positive like visions, she makes a very good point, actually, because this happened in another area in the last 2 or 3 years, as we know, with COVID, where basically they didn't want to focus on the high sort of survival rate of the virus. They want to focus on the deaths and the terrible nature that people were dying under this disease. But when you looked at the statistics, and that 99.7% of people survived this ghastly disease, or whatever you want to call it, they didn't say that. The media didn't say that. No one said it. They just did this daily death toll. of, if you remember, it was a daily death toll on the news channels. 727 today have died of COVID. 965 today have died of COVID. It's a very good point Abby makes, and it's subliminal because that affects people in how they think. They look at a number and go, "Oh, 900 people today, that's a lot," and without knowing anything else about death rates in the UK anyway, they don't even look at that. They just look at what they're being told. And so Abby makes a very good point there that they're very clever at using statistics to make the public believe that something is far, far worse than it actually is. Are we in agreement with that, folks?
Absolutely.
Abby, agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, I mean, the best people to use as examples of how we approach the media are politicians. And whether you love him or hate him, Boris Johnson is fantastic at being interviewed because he knows how to turn an interview around to talk about what it is he wants to talk about. So if I was ever in a conversation with someone from Animal Rebellion, I would question them. I would turn it on them and I would say, okay, so tell me here and now, do you want horse racing banned? Yes or no? Do you want the whip banned? Yes or no? Do you want the breed to die out? Yes or no? Are you happy to apologise for the chaos that your actions caused on the racetrack at the Grand National? Yes or no? Because it then exposes their dishonesty, and what it also exposes is their end goal. So what these campaigners are great at doing is utilising something called the ratchet effect. So they don't have any legal remit to ban horse racing. They can't just go up to the jockey club, serve them a notice and say, right, pack up, you're done here, the sport's gone. So they have to sit down and work out, okay, so how can we break it down into little segments to eventually get to that goal? Easy, digestible segments. And like you mentioned, subliminally, so you don't even really notice that it's happening. And so every time something like this happens, we have to take it very seriously because it's not just one day at the Grand National. That is in service to their end goal of banning horse racing. And we need to be a lot more forthright about exposing them for who they truly are. Ask them the questions. So actually, are those two horses that die every week, you were saying, is that in racing or is that overall? Are you talking about an incredibly well cared for animals of the stables, or are you talking about animals in the field? Challenge them. They hate it. And the best part about it is they physically squirm. They squirm on TV because they know they've been caught out. And that is what the public needs to see. They need to see, hang on a minute, when we put the screws to them, they don't have all the answers. They don't have the data. They don't actually care. All they want to say is, don't care, want it banned. Don't care what your data says. Don't care what you think. I just want it banned, and that's that.
Abby, I agree entirely there with what you're saying. However, can you see Harrington sending any of her team out with those instructions to do that?
No, I mean, I do think that, look, it is hard to be bold because you're sort of taking the risk of people saying to you, oh, I don't think you should have said that, or is the era we live in now where you can't even make jokes in the workplace anymore. Everything is woke. You can't say certain things. You can't do certain things. We've got gingerbread people. We've got, all sorts of nonsense. So I think nowadays people are really very careful of what they say in public. But not every conversation has to turn into an aggressive and heated debate, because actually our objective should be, we want to make them look like the lunatics. So we have to sit there in a calm and measured way. And I'll go back to Nevin Truesdale. Watch any interview he did. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get all het up. Even when he was debating that, I can't remember his name now, Dean something, the mad.
I'm just saying that fella. Yeah, he's a lunatic, isn't he?
Oh yeah, from Anna, and he spouts the most utter nonsense. And Nevin just continued in his calm and measured manner, and so it can be done. It can be done without us looking like lunatics as well. We have to galvanize as an industry and realize that we are not going to move forward and get these people sitting on our hands. And so I agree. I think that the BHA need to be a lot bolder, a lot stronger, and they need to not defend our sport. I don't really like that phrase, because defense implies that we're weak and we're vulnerable and there's something to be ashamed of. If you're defending something, that means there's something inherently wrong. So what we need to do is get back to the sport. We need to stop talking about sport like it's a great day out for entertainment. We need to say we are a great British sport. We have got British athletes on British horses, on British race courses, supporting millions in tax and thousands of British jobs. And that's what that's the direction of travel we need to go in. We have Britain's great sport, the sport of kings, and we should be very proud of it. We shouldn't be defending it in that manner, because, as I said, that then you enter into the issue of you are then constantly talking about the conversations that you want them to talk about and that they want you to talk about. So notice that in any election, the Conservatives always talk about the economy and Labour always talk about the NHS, because they will divert away from anything that they know is their weak area. And so we don't want to be constantly talking about welfare all the time in a negative light. We should be talking about it in a positive light. What we do for the horses, but more importantly, what the horses can do for you, what it means to be an owner, what it means to win the bet, what it means to stand at the rails. That's where we should be going. And I hope that I'm sure that Julie is a very capable woman, and I hope that she'll be able to do that. And I think if we all get behind each other, then maybe one day we can do that.
I agree with what Abby's saying. Again, to a point. But the thing is, John, we just think the BHA are just absolutely useless, don't we?
I wouldn't say right across the board absolutely useless, but I think the direction from the top is absolutely useless.
The cleaner is really good. I understand.
I think there's people there that could follow instruction. Unfortunately, I do not think the instruction from the CEO's office will come, because she is there marking time till she goes on to the next grift. She doesn't love this sport.
Yeah. No, right. To finish this then, to finish the topic before we move on, I want to know each of your opinion. Right. So what you're head of the BHA right now. I think I know what Abby would do in terms of the future. Abby would come across fantastically as head of the BHA. She'd promote it in the right way. I kind of get that. John, if you head of the BHA, would you ban the National?
No, you can't now. Sadly.
So what would you do now?
I'd pretty much do exactly what Abby suggests with regard to a robust defence. I know you don't class it as a defending of the sport, but I'll call it a robust defence. And I would not actively promote the National to the wider world the way it is, because, as I say, I think we're on a good fucking to nothing with it.
Chris?
I think, I would take Abby's view absolutely to heart. I would ignore the lunatics and I would look to engage with the middle ground rather than the extremists.
Yeah, I think what I would do is I'm in John's camp right now, in that I'm of similar view that I've always felt National Hunt Racing is always going to be the first to be attacked and in trouble, because for obvious reason. But now you cannot cede to these people. I get James Knight's point of view. He was uncomfortable with the race. I think I've seen Twitter polls of large numbers saying 35% of racing people are uncomfortable with the race yesterday. That has to be taken on board. But now I'm with John, and you carry on and you defend it to the hill. It's a bit like you're fighting a battle for the industry, because this will bring me nicely into our next subject, because I'll go all tinfoil here and I'll say, look, I think we're seeing an enormous rise of Marxism infiltrating governments, infiltrating policy, infiltrating the horse racing industry as it stands. And I've got evidence to back this up, because, right, so we've talked about the National and what we're seeing. We're seeing small protester groups get on mainstream media. We're seeing the case against racing being a safe and enjoyable sport being broadcast across mainstream media. We're seeing the Gambling Commission that are actively taking part in gambling harms, and this for me is a form of Marxism. This is about prohibition, and it's attacking racing two-pronged. It's coming for the sport. It's saying the sport's cruel. It's barbaric. It's also saying that the sport and the word betting is also a dirty word. So it's attacking it two-pronged. Betting is dirty. Betting is harmful. And it's saying the sport itself is cruel. Right. So this is where I'm at. I think we're seeing a double entendre, if you like, that these people were allowed en masse to speak across social platforms. The media is complicit in this. I'm certain of it. We're at a stage now where horse racing is under severe attack, and a lot of people don't realise this or even see this as a subject. And the evidence is key, because I shared a document with you guys regarding what the Gambling Commission did in 2021, where they gave 140,000 to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research to undertake a cost-benefit analysis of gambling. So basically to say, right, what's the cost-benefit of people gambling? But then they changed it. They moved the goalpost. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research changed the goalpost after they'd received the funding to gambling harm. Basically, we're going to now monitor about how it affects gambling harm. And yet again, we're seeing it again, Sage style. We're seeing 1.4 billion. They reckon it's a cost to the economy of people that are suffering at the moment from gambling harm. What a load of bollocks. This is the same thing we went through COVID, that we're going to get Professor Neil Ferguson, while he was shagging his mistress, decided to tell us all that 500,000 of us were going to die in year one of COVID. Absolute fucking nonsense. And we're seeing it yet again. This is a research grift, and this angers me more than anything, because racing is going to come into a lot of focus here by doctors, random doctors, researchers, and in the name of my industry. What I do, this is what I do. I've been involved in racing all my life. It's a disgrace.
The whole study just looked very, very stacked, didn't it? And Woody posted an article on Patreon, I think it was this morning.
Yeah, which is free to air, by the way. Free to air.
I had a good read of that this morning, and he summed it up a lot better than I ever could in his analysis of it. I mean, the whole setup is very, very jaundiced against racing and against betting. There's it makes out, the individuals involved, you would assume there is no upside to betting. I mean, I know people that would be in the gutter without betting.
Absolutely.
And yet here we are, again, defending what to most people in the country is a harmless pastime, defending it against absolute zealots.
How can we put this to the masses in terms of what's going on here? Because I'm certain it is. I don't know if you agree with me on what I've just said, but it appears, these people are out to kill any enjoyment, the game itself. Because if you haven't got betting and horse racing is cruel, what have we got for the sport?
Well, agreed that they are the fun sponges of the world, aren't they? They basically want to take all the fun out of everything. And I'm really glad that you mentioned COVID, because I think that is a huge contributor to what's going on here, because COVID made the government responsible for every single death. Every single death of COVID was somehow the government's fault. And so that's why they continuously brought in these nonsense measures to try and bring the death rate down. The government is not responsible for when someone dies. OK, that's just a ludicrous precedent to set. And so we're in a situation now where we're in a huge exercise of smoke and mirrors by our lawmakers. So let's think back to 2 years ago when we were expressly told to follow the science as a guidepost to our behaviour. Now, I see absolutely no evidence that the science around addiction is being followed here. So let's start off with the simple fact that gambling is an instinctive human trait. So how many times do you say in general conversation, I bet this train is cancelled? I bet you a fiver that, I don't know, that it's raining tomorrow. We do it all the time. Humans are hardwired to want to know the outcome of something. And the second thing is we're dealing with human behaviour here, not spreadsheets. So let's take the removal of gambling advertising from football strips. That assumes that humans have no free will, that the only reason why we do things is because it's marketed to us. The only reason why we gamble is because we see a marketing advert on the TV. So they've tried to attach logic to something that's as irrational as human behaviour. So if that were the case, nobody would ever take illegal drugs, because I haven't noticed any marketing for crystal meth, yet people still take it. There's nothing that flashes up on the BBC when you're eating your tea saying buy a crystal meth now. So
and I'm gonna.
Might make it more interesting. So there isn't a connection, a sound connection between advertising and how it is humans behave. So I think we have to take a similar approach to gambling as we do in horse racing. We have to sow the seed of doubt in people's minds. What will they do next? So, OK, you don't gamble, it doesn't affect you, but it does affect you, because once they've done gambling, once they've killed that off, what are they going to go for next? So at first, they started to attack smoking. So and in fairness, smoking is a good one to go for first, because most people don't like it. Most people are anti-smoking. But then they went for alcohol. Then they went for salt. Then they went for sugar. Now they're coming for gambling. What next? And if you pose that question, what next? People think, bloody hell, are they going to come for something that I like next? These people
up to now, the four things you mentioned, I absolutely love, Abby.
Crystal meth.
Yeah.
Blimey. But also,
tweakers we all are, honestly.
Yeah.
There needs to be a lot more calling out again of all of this anti-gambling data. Because look, I do a PhD in neuroscience, so I should be pro data, but there is such a thing as too much data, and there is an awful lot of anti-gambling data around. And so people think, oh well, the more data you have, the more needles you have, but you also have more hay, and so sometimes more data actually clouds your judgment, because it allows you to make these big assumptions over things that aren't actually there. So you would think, if you listen to some of these anti-gambling zealots, that people were dropping dead of gambling every 5 minutes, that people were flinging themselves off of bridges every time they stepped inside a Ladbrokes. That is simply not the case, because we know that from research that we have done on addiction, that there are certain people who are genetically predisposed to addiction. There's something in their minds that means that when they place a bet, it affects them an awful lot more than it does for the average person. So these anti-gambling zealots will have you believe that everybody is one bet away from addiction, one step away from addiction. And so we have to channel the opposite science to say, look, the science that you're using is all about the logic of how you think people would behave. So, oh, you've lost a bet, you're going to be sad, you might in some way harm yourself. Whereas actually we know that it's only specific people that really struggle with gambling. And that's why we have such a low problem gambling rate. But we have to link the two. We have to call them out again, as we should do for the horse racing zealots, for their their invalidity and their unreliability. And if we do that, if we address both groups at the same time, it means that horse racing is no longer under attack from two different angles. It's under attack from just this one great big unreliable mob. And then it's easier to go out and defend it, because it's much easier to fight just in one direction than if you are fighting in all directions.
Yeah, the problem for me with this as well, chaps, and Chris, I'm going to come to you with this one because you'll relate to this. So the problem is that the bar that's set for gambling harm, right? So they're setting it at things like, oh, well, if you gamble and you have too much money, you might not be able to book that holiday to Benidorm. That's a gambling harm. Well, why is it a gambling harm? Because basically, when Authorised won the derby, I said to the ex-missus, I said, if Authorised wins the derby, I said, we'll go to Barbados, right? So, like, if it didn't, we weren't going, right? Right.
It was indeed, yes,
yeah.
yes.
So there you go, right? So what I'm trying to say is, so would that's classed as a gambling harm then, that I've deprived my ex-wife of going to Barbados because Authorised didn't win the derby?
Yes, but you're right. No, but that's how it's framed, isn't it? But I think people have drunk the Kool-Aid of the old tropes that, oh, you never see a poor bookie, the bookie always wins, gambling's a mug's game, etc., etc. And for someone said to me once a long time ago, someone who had some issues with problem gambling, and when he finally fessed up to his family and said, look, I've been knocking my conkers out every week and I've got a gambling problem, he said their reaction would have been more sympathetic had he said, I'm addicted to heroin. And it's this kind of sense that the gambling has had over the last few years, that it's like the worst thing you can possibly do. You could admit to being a heroin addict, an alcoholic, a career criminal, any of these things. But seemingly, for whatever reason, gambling it has this special place of hatred in a lot of people's view. And I think we've got to, I don't know how, I think we've got to try and find a way of explaining to people that not everyone who has a bet is hopelessly addicted, in the same way that not everyone who has the odd glass of wine with their meal is a hopeless alcoholic, because they don't seem to make that link, do they? People say to me, oh, you bet, oh, you must be addicted then. I say, well, do you like a drink? Oh, yeah. I said, well, you're alcoholic. Well, clearly not. Well, it's the same thing. And I don't know how we would kind of attack that, because I think
it's that narrative, isn't it? If you're on a train and somebody says you're reading the Financial Times, you've got it together, you're organised, you're making a good living. You're reading the Racing Post, you're a fucking waster.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of a theory on that, in terms of, again, it comes back to language, and it comes back to understanding what people actually hear when they hear something. So what do we call someone who's addicted to alcohol? We call them an alcoholic. What do we call someone who takes heroin? We call them a substance abuser, a drug addict. What do we call someone who's addicted to gambling? A problem gambler. And the reason why the anti-gambling lobby love that phrase is because when you hear it, it sounds like the problem is intrinsically linked to gambling. They have a problem with gambling. No, they don't. Their gambling is their medium, but they have a problem with addiction. That's the truth of it. And so that's what the science says. So, I think everyone, apart from me, because I was a goody two shoes when I was at school, has taken a puff of a cigarette, right? Everyone's done it behind the bike sheds when they were 15, right? So some people...
You're not just on about cigarettes there, are you, Robbie?
Blimey.
Apple clean. Apple clean rating on. That's it.
Yeah, I really wouldn't know. No, there's obviously a difference between someone who takes a puff of one cigarette and then that's it, someone who takes a puff of a cigarette and then maybe smokes when they're a teenager to rebel from their parents, and then there are some people who will chain smoke throughout their lives. And so there's obviously, so the medium is the same, the cigarette is the same, everyone's got that cigarette, but certain people can put it down and walk away after one puff and say, no, thanks, don't want it. And some people get it and they are instantly addicted, and they're addicted throughout their lives. So the cigarette it's the same object. It hasn't changed. What's different about those three groups of people is the individuals within them. And so we need to have a different science-based conversation and explain that actually we're not going to have a conversation about gambling. We're going to have a conversation about addiction, because they have linked gambling and addiction together so much. Let's not forget that 40% of gambling addicts are also addicted to alcohol and substance abuse. So it can't just be gambling, can it? And so therefore, when we talk about gambling suicides, how can we certainly pin it on gambling? We don't know, because people have other addictions in their lives. So we have to be more front-footed again about challenging these inaccuracies, and about we use our opponent's language so much. In horse racing, we say the whip. They love that we use the whip because it sounds cruel. What do you think of when you think of whipping? Well, maybe that's too broad a question. I'm not sure I want to go into that.
180 quid an hour is what I think.
But the point is that they love that we use it because it's their language. It sounds like a cruel word. So when we say problem gamblers, they love it because we're talking from their hymn sheet, and we need to stop doing that. We need to create our own data. We need to create our own lines of attack, and we need to create our own language. These are gambling addicts. These are people with an addiction. They are not problem gamblers.
Yeah, you've described it correct. I mean, I have a lot of. I talked to a couple actually privately, gamblers, and I use the word gambling with harm because they actually don't like the term problem gambler. It kind of makes them look a degenerate sort of kind of thing. So that's the language I use to them, and they respect me for it because obviously I've bet for a living for a long time. It's a very difficult living to make. And they respect, they like my side of the story as well. And I speak to a couple that really they don't like what's taking place in terms of these gambling harm groups that are saying that, gambling is bad, because they don't want that to happen. But sadly, when you get grifters, when you get gambling harm groups that are purely on the grift, and which they are, they're going to, when this statutory levy comes in, which the operators are going to have to pay, it'd be like Oliver Twist, they're all queuing up for the bowl and how much are we going to get for our research? And we know what researchers do, because once researchers get in, they claim there's more problems than we've realised, and we need more money to fund the next grift. So this is bad for racing, and like you've said from the start of the show, Abby, you have to show teeth here, and you have to really fight back, because this is what's happened. We've ceded ground to these people. We've let them in, and once they're in, that's it. They ain't leaving, and they ain't leaving the building, and they're not going to stop. And they're not going to stop at the Grand National. And this is terribly worrying, isn't it, Chris? It's worrying for us.
Yeah, it is. The fox is in the hen house, and I agree with everything Abby says. That when you switch on the TV, there is rarely, if ever, someone on a TV debate that's there to back for the cause of recreational punting. It's always a one-sided debate, and these people are very media savvy. They're well funded, and as you say, it's almost, you have to find problems to guarantee your next sort of a tranche of funding. So it's a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy, if that's not a mangled term. It is in their interest to over exaggerate the scale of the problem, and it's a grift, isn't it? If you want to make money, the old thing, you start your own religion, but now it's start your own gambling survivors group or whatever victim group, because that's where the money is. That's where government seem very keen to throw money. So if you want to earn out of it, set up a charity or a support group.
Yeah, I mean this is where, people would say I'm an alcoholic. The amounts I drink a week, and I'm not going to disclose them publicly on here, but I don't have to. But I drink a hell of a lot, but people, I don't feel sorry for myself. I don't think. I need to, like listen to somebody else telling me that, well, you drink too much. Well, I do. I don't care. I enjoy it. I think it's fantastic.
You don't drink
you
too
think,
much, Lee, but you're a million miles from being an alcoholic.
But don't you think there's a sort of a slightly softer, people sort of smirk when they say someone, old John, he's a pisshead, or old Dave, he likes to drink. But if you say that somebody likes a bet, it's almost sort of done in a slightly, sorrowful way. The sense that drinking's funny, getting absolutely blotto every weekend is humorous, but knocking your wages out on a Friday is a lot more serious and worthy of
It's this
concern.
perception, though, Chris.
Yeah.
If somebody says to you, "What do you do for a living?" and you say, "Oh, well, I back horses," and I guarantee the next question to you will be, "Do you make money at it?"
Yeah.
And the stock answer back should be, "Well, no, I've just done money and out my magic top hat for 35 years."
Sure.
I think most of my life, I have lied about what I do when confronted by people, because I know that the majority of people out there think that gambling is degenerate. Well, I judge the person, really. I look at them, and then I'll work them out. If they sort of are Jack the Lad or whatever, then I'll fess up to what I do. But
because Lee, but what if you told them you played the stock market or you were a currency day trader? They'd probably have more respect.
You get invited to the niece's wedding, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because the sense is that all racing's all fixed and it's a mugs game, but they don't have that same view about the stock market or currency, etc. So although playing the stock market or being a day trader is exactly the same, it's punting. You're betting on the outcome of something that has an inherent greater sense of respectability or credibility than betting on horses, which a lot of people regard as it's all crooked and you can't make money at it.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Abby, go on.
That's right. I would go a step further than that, and I would say that, and I agree with you. You can call up a hedge funder and you can say, "Can I whack 20 grand of shares?" And they'll go, "Yeah, no problem." They don't ask you where it's from. They don't ask you if they could afford it. All they do is ask you how fast you can give them the money. But when you buy a car, say you spend 10 grand on a car, is that not a bet that that's going to be a good car? It's going to be economical. It's going to be a good drive. It's not going to it's not going to cost you a fortune. Everything is a bet. When you buy a house, is it a bet that you're going to like it? It's going to be in a nice area. They're not going to build a prison opposite it. Everything you buy is a bet. And so what I do think is that I agree with the point that people think that gambling is a dirty business because it involves money changing hands. But I would kind of combat that with the simple fact that if you bring in gambling affordability checks and you have to show your bank statement, people who are addicted to gambling are not going to say, "Oh, well, that's me done. I guess I'll stop being addicted to gambling now, won't I?" What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go onto the internet and they are going to find a website where you pay 50 quid for somebody to generate a fake bank statement for you. And I know those websites exist because I've been on them, and they post samples of their bank statements. And let me tell you, you cannot tell the difference. It is the technology they use now is so fantastic that if you showed someone in the street, "Tell me the fake bank statement," they probably wouldn't know. And so sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And the anti-gambling lobby will say, "Okay, well, gambling's a dirty business and it's crooked and it's degenerate and whatnot." And then we have to say, "Well, hang on a minute. The measures that you're going to bring in are actually going to encourage criminal enterprise. They're going to encourage fraud. They're going to encourage people to fake bank statements." Nobody, whether they like gambling or not, likes fraud. And so that's what we have to make the conversation about what we want to make it about. And then hopefully the perception of gambling will change along with it.
Indeed. These are the problems that I think the antis don't think of. Is that they love the idea of a utopia that, oh, we're going to sort out the people with addiction. We're going to help them, but they don't realise the consequences of what's going to happen elsewhere. Like you say, a person with an addiction will find a way. No matter what you do, they will find a way, whether it's the black market, whether it's like you've just said, Abby, committing fraud to be able to get their bet on or go on the slots, whatever it is they do. They will find a way. That's how it's worked. They tried prohibition with alcohol back in the day. How did that go? Not very well, because they got no taxation from it, and everyone started importing stuff from Ireland and whiskey from Ireland into America. And the prohibition days went terribly wrong because people were still getting pissed up, but the government were getting no tax from it. This is where we're at. We're back here again. It's like Groundhog Day. I'm sorry I can't get through all your questions on the show, because obviously we've overrun in terms of time, but we hope you feel it was a good show. Just a couple, though, to finish off, to do with the National. Reese said, do you think it will be worth taking the National off free-to-air TV? Because these fuckers are actively watching it in the hope a horse gets injured. John?
Well, as I said in response to the tweet, I'm with him, to be honest. I think the lower profile of the National, the better.
Yeah. Obviously, not everyone will think like that, but yeah. Next one is from Trainer Geezer. Wonder if he's a trainer. I wonder if he's like a big trainer. We don't know. Twitter anonymity. Morning, John. Interested to hear thoughts on the turn from racing Twitter before and after the National. Before the race, everyone viewed the protesters as wrong-uns. Afterwards, racing Twitter described the main event as carnage. With what we could say, the protesters were successful, were they not?
Possibly.
I think that we have to make the link between what they did and the messiness of the First Circuit. I think that's so. I obviously one can't speculate, and there will be analysis going on as we speak as to what happened. But for them to ever suggest that what they didn't cause any problems for the horses is absolutely ludicrous. And then you're able to then get into that conversation of, so why did they do it then? What are their real motivations? And so I do think that, look, no one likes seeing a horse fall. No one likes learning that the horse has passed away. But we can also do a better job of making sure that we push the message that every time a horse falls, that they're somehow gravely injured, they do get up. And this is part of the problem with mainstream media as well, is that they love to show the green screen going up. They don't like showing it going down when the horse gets up and walks back to the paddock. So again, it's that kind of positive welfare. We need to show that actually horses do get up. And the fact that there was a lot of negativity on Twitter afterwards, I think should prove to us that we need to do more to actively promote our positive welfare story.
Yeah, 100% with that. And I'd like you on the BHA, Abby. I think you need to be somewhere up there in terms of running the sport.
Very kind, thank you.
No, definitely. Like yourself, somebody like Richard Oyles, Kevin Blake, people like that basically talk sense and just bring balance to the force. Chris, final word with you.
I could not articulate it better than Abby has just done. That has to be the strategy, and I think new voices, intelligent voices, people with a background in the sport and academia are the kind of people that the BHA need to be wheeling out to combat this existential threat. So I got nothing more to add to that. I think that's a great summary.
Good stuff. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the show, folks. We're back for the Craven preview tomorrow. That's tomorrow evening on Patreon. Yeah, tomorrow evening on Patreon. Tuesday morning for you paupers that won't pay us £7. You're a disgrace for not paying us £7 for the best content on the entire internet. So we hope you've enjoyed it. That's all from me, Abby, John, and Chris. Bye for now.